Once upon a time, Nazi Germany was a powerful and oppressive regime that sought to expand its influence throughout Europe and beyond. In the early 1930s, Adolf Hitler rose to power as the leader of the Nazi Party and quickly consolidated his control over the government and military. Part 1. As the Nazi regime's persecution of marginalized groups intensified, a small group of resistance fighters secretly organized to resist the oppressive regime. Among them was Anna, a young Jewish woman who had been forced to flee her home and go into hiding to avoid being captured by the Nazis. Anna had lost her entire family to the Nazi regime and was determined to fight back against their tyranny. With the help of a few trusted allies, she began gathering information about the regime's plans and operations, using her knowledge of the city to move undetected. But the resistance's efforts were not without risk. The Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, were ruthless in their efforts to root out resistance fighters and anyone who defied their rule. Anna knew that if she was caught, she would face certain death. Despite the danger, Anna and the resistance persisted, determined to bring down the Nazi regime and restore justice to their country. But as their plans began to take shape, they soon realized that they were facing an enemy far more powerful and cunning than they had ever imagined. The suspense was mounting, and Anna and her comrades knew that they were in a race against time. Would they be able to outsmart the Nazis and bring down the oppressive regime, or would their efforts be in vain? The fate of their country and the lives of countless innocent people hung in the balance. Part 2. As the war raged on, the stakes for Anna and the resistance grew ever higher. With the Nazis gaining ground across Europe, they knew that their efforts to resist the regime had become more critical than ever before. Working tirelessly in secret, Anna and her fellow resistance fighters gathered information about Nazi military operations, hoping to discover a weakness that they could exploit to gain an advantage in the war. But the Gestapo was always watching, and every move they made carried the risk of being discovered. Despite the danger, Anna refused to give up. She knew that the fate of her country and the world hung in the balance, and that if the Nazis were not stopped, their reign of terror would continue unchecked. As the war dragged on, the resistance's efforts paid off. They uncovered critical intelligence that allowed the Allied forces to launch a massive invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, striking a decisive blow against the regime and turning the tide of the war. But the victory came at a high cost. Many of Anna's fellow resistance fighters were captured, tortured, and killed by the Gestapo, and Anna herself narrowly escaped death on several occasions. As the war drew to a close, Anna knew that the struggle against tyranny was far from over. The world had seen the horrors of Nazi Germany, but there were other regimes like it, waiting to rise up and spread their hate and violence. But for Anna, the fight was worth it. She had risked everything to resist the Nazis and fight for a better world, and she knew that the struggle for justice would continue for generations to come. Part 3. In the aftermath of World War II, Anna emerged as a hero to her people, a symbol of resistance and hope in the face of oppression. But her work was far from over. As the world struggled to come to terms with the horrors of the Nazi regime, Anna and the remaining resistance fighters worked tirelessly to rebuild their shattered country and prevent the rise of new regimes that might threaten the world with hate and violence once again. But the forces of authoritarianism and hate were not so easily defeated. Across the world, new movements arose, promoting racist and extremist ideologies and seeking to spread their message of hate and fear. Anna knew that the struggle against tyranny would never truly end, and she dedicated the rest of her life to fighting against the forces of hatred and violence wherever they might be found. Decades later, as the world watched the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of Germany, Anna smiled, knowing that the fight against tyranny was never truly in vain. Today, as the world continues to grapple with the ongoing threat of authoritarianism and extremism, the legacy of Anna and the resistance fighters lives on, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and courage can light the way to a brighter future.